Hi, I'm Tom, and in today's video we're going to be talking all about setting up remote cameras for wildlife photography. For a little bit of context, I'm a professional wildlife photographer, Nikon Europe Optic Ambassador. I've been using techniques like this for many years to create different and interesting images of wildlife out in the field. It's a fantastic way to get your camera close and to get a unique perspective on the natural world. Today we're going to run through the camera gear I use, how to set up the camera, some of the benefits of shooting like this, to give you some ideas to take home and make your own images out in the field. So let's get cracking. Right, so before we get started finding a location, I want to run you through the kit that I'm using today. You know, people when they talk wildlife photography always think like your big 600, 500mm lens. And to be honest, as much as these are fantastic, they don't always produce the image that I'm really looking for. And it's why a lot of the time I resort to using wide angle remote cameras to get something a little bit different and for me, a bit more interesting. So what's in the bag? Well, let's start up with obviously a camera. Today I'm using my Nikon Z8. Fantastic camera, great megapixels, beautiful full frame camera, but you know, any camera that you've got is acceptable for this. And there's just two things that I really need from my camera. I need a remote port that I can access and trigger the camera with. And secondly, I want an HDMI out because then I can monitor the feed of the camera to watch the shot that I'm looking for. Lens-wise, I've got a 24-120 on here, very standard lens, more than acceptable for this style of shooting. Now, the second thing that I've got that's kind of addition to me to make this much easier and to just, you know, more reliable when I'm out there getting pictures is my little Atomos. This is the Shinobi 2. This is just a little monitor that I can run to the camera so I can view what the camera's seeing when I've got it in position. The reason I really like this, it's very small, very light, easy to take in the field. Obviously runs on batteries. They've got a couple of spare ones with me, so I can use it all day. Really nice to have. And yeah, far less cumbersome than dragging a laptop with me out into the field. That's nice to go, so that's there. The last thing that I really need are these. These are my pocket wizards, my trigger of choice for remote camera shooting. One goes in my hand, one on the camera, and then these have a really nice function that I can also half press them before I shoot. That means if I did want to use autofocus for my remote camera, I can do that as well. Then I can view from the monitor what the autofocus is doing before I nail the shot. The last couple of things are of course some way of mounting the camera. I've got a tripod with me, but also my favorite is usually this, it's a Manfrotto Magic Arm. But that's it for the gear bag. I think what we'll do is go and find a location and I'll walk you through the process of taking the picture. Right, so I've got everything packed up. Let's go and find a location to show you how to set up a remote camera. Now, why do we use remotes? I think one of the big things here is all about getting a different image of wildlife. Something where you can show the environment, the context around your subject, and just get a completely different angle than you'd be used to on something like the 600mm. Now, when I'm looking for areas, of course, I need places that wildlife's coming back to. It might be areas where they regularly feed. It might be somewhere that they're breeding, where we've got to be more careful of in terms of, make sure we're not disturbing and stuff like that. Or it could just be a natural pass-through location where you regularly see a subject and you know it's going to come back, and it's a perfect chance to return to it, sit off, wait for the wildlife to come in and get that more interesting frame. Right, so here's somewhere I found earlier. This has got a typical style of shoot I might be working with a remote camera. Got a nest box. I'm going to try and get a picture of the birds coming back to it. And this is a kind of ideal opportunity to use a remote camera. I don't want to disturb the wildlife. I want to move back. I want to see the natural behavior occur, but I still want to create kind of an interesting wide angle shot of the nest box, bird coming in, and then the scene around it. Now today we're not going to get that picture because we're early in the season. I know there's no birds in the nest box. That's because I'm showing you how to do this, and we don't want to disturb the wildlife with me, cameraman, all that sort of stuff milling around here. We don't want to do that. This is just for your educational benefit. So I'm going to grab some kit out and just show you the process of how I do it. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is work out where my composition is. Obviously the box is here, but looking across to the background, I've got a nice river running past, tree in the background, and so framing up about here is really quite nice. So I've got the box kind of on 1/3 and I've got 2/3 of background. That's often how I'm framing up these. This looks like a pretty sturdy branch to work from. Perfect chance to use my super clamp. Right, so we get the camera on here. Super simple. Yeah, you could have like a quick release on this, but to be honest, when I'm doing this sort of work, it's going to be in position for a long time, spending the whole day. So, right, let's get our composition right. So obviously, got the camera in position, so the wildlife's going to come here, back to my box. Now, how are we going to trigger it? Well, we're going to use those two items I said. Plug my HDMI cable in. This is so I can monitor from a distance. Now, in terms of the camera settings itself, I'm actually going to switch over from manual that I'm usually in and pop us into aperture priority. The reason for that is just because I can't touch the camera, I'm not changing the settings, and aperture priority means I can set my aperture. I'm going to be like f8 here, making sure I've got loads of depth of field to get it right. I'm going to put my ISO 800, that should be plenty today. It's going to give me loads of light to make sure I can get a high shutter speed. And then basically I'm going to dial in just 1/3 underexposure, just because then I won't clip highlights. I'm not going to be able to, you know, visibly change the settings on the camera when I'm away from it. So just check that there, and that should just protect those highlights. That's all looking good. Everything's good, and from my monitor, I can see that's looking really, really nice. Now the final thing is put my triggers in. Always put fresh batteries in when you're doing this because you don't want them to run out. Even if I've not used them for ages, you know, I know that they've got pretty new batteries, I still change to brand new batteries every single time, just because if that awesome bit of wildlife turns up on that one day and then the battery runs out of juice, that is a real problem. Stick that in there. Right, that's all set up and ready to go. Put my other pocket wizard on and just check that that's, yep, that's all working. That's absolutely great. So now my system's pretty much ready to go. One thing I would do a lot of the time is grab something like this. This is one of my covers, my camera covers. Obviously conditions change when you're out in the field. You know, it's a beautiful sunny day today, but often, you know, here in the UK, it's raining, conditions change. So I get this over the camera and I'm just gonna pop that in here. This is also good for just concealing it a little bit, hide it into the environment a bit more. That looks pretty good. Now we can retreat back from the camera, find ourselves a comfortable spot to wait it out. And then obviously I can view what I'm looking at, I can view what the camera's seeing, and then trigger as we go with my other pocket wizard to nail that picture. Right, so I've retreated back from my remote camera, got myself in a nice comfortable spot, and now I can just wait it out to get the images I'm after. Now before I left the camera, I did manually focus. It's really nice on the Shinobi actually, because the peaking here, I can see exactly what's in focus in the frame. So when the animal finally does come into the frame, I'm gonna see the peaking around it, and then I can nail that shot, making sure it's bang, pin sharp in focus. That's really nice to have. Now some people might ask, Tom, like, why are you using such an old school system? You know, this long cable, wire, there's more modern ways to do this sort of thing. And yeah, there might be, but for me, I really love the wired connection. It's very stable, it's very consistent. You know, I'm not gonna have it drop out at any point. I've also got no latency. That's really important when you've got fast moving wildlife subjects. I wanna know exactly when they're in the point of the frame, and then I can nail that picture. You know, when was the last time that your TV HDMI cable didn't work, but compare that to your Wi-Fi at home, well, it drops out all the time. So I'd much rather have something a bit more reliable. Now, of course, now I'm set up, ready to go. I then regularly have a second camera. I can set the 600 up, so I've got one wide angle shot, one telephoto shot, working with two cameras at once. That gives me multiple options. Again, really handy for wildlife photography. But you know, this is just a great, comfortable place to be. And of course, you don't have to be here. You don't have to trek miles into the middle of nowhere to set up your remote camera. You can do this at home in the garden. Wildlife photography doesn't have to be super hardcore all the time. It can be nice, relaxing, sat in the sun, making some pictures and having a really enjoyable time. Okay, so for this next shoot, you're joining me here in Suffolk. I'm on RSPB Havagate Island, and tonight I'm trying to get some landscape pictures of an environment that I've been photographing for the last couple of years. And the Shinobi 2 is really going to come into its own, because when I put the camera in position, I'm not going to be able to touch it and update any of the settings. And that's where this little monitor is going to give me some real great advantages. And that's all down to the addition of the USB-C that we have from this monitor. It allows to control the camera. Various camera models can be used with this. My Z9, Z8 work perfectly. A lot of other mirrorless cameras work as well. There's a whole list on the website. Check that before you purchase one for this feature. But what it means is via USB-C, I can take over my camera and I can manually control the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, white balance. I can even use touch to focus, meaning that when the camera's not in my hand, I can have full control. I can also, of course, trigger the shutter and get that perfect shot. Let's get this into the air. Now my stand goes about 6 meters high. That should give me quite a lot of reach and scope to get an interesting angle. It means I can have that full frame camera right up in the air, and let's look for the shot. Now, I've already kind of pre-adjusted my angle of the camera, and I'm just going to rotate that there. That's looking very nice. Now I can see from the camera that I'm overexposed, and just with a couple of taps of going into the camera settings, I can easily update my shutter speed, push that up, and actually push up my aperture a little bit to give me a bit more depth of field, drop that shutter speed back down, and do this with such ease, because not only can I see exactly what the viewfinder's looking for, I can tap to focus to get my point perfectly where I want it. I've got my live histogram, meaning my exposure is going to be just absolutely nailed, and I can so easily, bang, trigger the camera and shoot the shot. Really, really handy. All great stuff to have. You know, this monitor features peaking, zebras, waveforms. If you want to do video as well, you could also run this very, very easily. And if that wasn't good enough, obviously with my camera out of reach and in position where I want to have it there for multiple hours, I might run into the issue of battery life. Obviously running the HDMI, the camera on the whole time, it's going to drain the battery. But the Shinobi has another trick up its sleeve, and that's that the lovely MPF battery here can actually do battery pass-through. So running through the USB-C cable up to my camera to keep it charged when it's out of reach. And the 5.9-inch screen gives me great visibility in all conditions, and being bright at like 1500 nits, I can easily see it even with my sunglasses on, meaning I can make those critical decisions about my image and get the shots that I'm after. And that is perfect just there. That's it for today. So hopefully you picked up a few tips there for your own wildlife shooting. I think using a remote camera is a fantastic way to get some interesting and different shots, and it's great if you're just getting started in wildlife photography. You know, today we just showed a really basic example of how I would actually set up a camera in the field, but a lot of the time it's for far more complicated shoots. You know, if I'm working low down on the ground, I want to get this really unique angle, or maybe I've even got the camera up in a tree. It's all about finding those unique places that you can get a really cool shot. And that's the world that remote wildlife photography really opens up. But right, that's it for today. And we'll catch you very soon.